Here. There's some over here. Who else? Okay, we will get started in a few minutes here. Sure that any stragglers that come in do get their entrees. So Monique, you're going to be watching for one more time. Did everybody get entrees? Is there anybody missing an entree? Raise your hand. There's one over here, Monique. We have someone over here that's looking for an entree. And we will be watching for anybody else if you guys need anything. I do want to remind you, we will have a little bit of time for Q&A. If you have questions, please raise your hand and wait for my tech team to come with the mic, because we have a pretty large room here, and we also have another 150 people watching virtual. So we want to make sure that everyone hears your questions. And for my virtual attendees out there, we want to hear your voice as well. So if you have any questions, please put your question in the chat box, and we will make sure that we get your questions to our speaker as well. So today it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Jacob Combs. Jacob is transformational cybersecurity executive who currently serves as the Chief Information Security Officer at Tandem Diabetes Care, a leader in healthcare technology. Throughout his distinguished career leading global security for multi-billion-dollar companies, Jacob has been at the forefront of converting security into a catalyst for innovation and true business advantage. He's an expert in architecting security for high-growth digital businesses and has deep hands-on experience in leveraging artificial intelligence to defend against the world's most complex cyber threats. His work in shaping strategy around emerging technology gives him a unique and critical perspective on the next frontier of digital disruption. Today, he'll be sharing his invaluable insights on convergence of AI and quantum. So everyone, please join me in giving him a very warm welcome, Jacob Combs.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're enjoying your lunches. This is kind of weird for me to talk to you all when you're eating, but here we go. So really happy to be here today with you all. It's a very nice set of folks looking here. I had some nice conversations today. But what I'm going to talk about today is quite I'd say a bold topic, but I don't want you to think about it as resonating all the stuff you continue to hear about the fear coming around AI, as well as the skepticism that comes around quantum computing. What I'm trying to do today is, one, integrate a sense of urgency around the strategic importance of preparing ourselves for these technologies and our organizations, and as well as giving you some practical, at least what I think is some pragmatic or practical steps you can take to prepare your organization for this. So not a lot of the same hype you see online. So first, to kind of kick this off, I want you to understand what the cost of inaction means here for these technologies. So one is this: we have this kind of false security paradox right now, where the real instantiation of AGI or quantum computing is so far out that we're not really thinking about them now, right? It's very difficult to communicate this to your executive team to give me some funding to start taking on quantum computing, giving out how far out at least a lot of the experts say it is. So that's one kind of challenge. But the other one is and something more to start thinking about now is the reality of the long life cycle of not only your systems or your products, but also the data that you support as well. So that's something that's going to be very key, and we'll talk a bit about that more into the presentation here. And then the last piece now is the regulatory acceleration. We're already starting to see a lot of the regulators and a lot of governments and different organizations you have to partner with starting to think about this and ask for preparations from your side as well. So that's kind of setting the stage for that. But really what the essence of the talk today is going to be about is this critical intersection, right? Each of these different areas are certainly growing and expanding and challenging on their own. But what I'm going to be honing in on today is that middle piece, right? There's a lot of uncertainty in there and a lot of unknowns that we're not really prepared for, but how these kind of technologies will intersect and work together. And I'll talk about each one individually, and then at the end kind of come together at least what I think are the steps we should be taking as security professionals to prepare our organizations. Okay? So who am I? A little more background on myself. I'm Jacob Combs. I'm the CISO at Tandem Diabetes Care. It's headquartered here in San Diego. We make insulin pumps, so a lot of the medical device healthcare space I work around. Very heavily regulated, very dangerous. So I like to talk about the ultimate risk of our product is death, because insulin could kill you. And so that's kind of the space I like to work in. But I have been an engineer my entire career, 20 plus years working in software development, IT, back and forth across telecommunications, Department of Defense, financial services, and as well as healthcare. So I've seen a lot of regulatory challenges as well as just the challenges of these complex industries. And then what I'm here to do today is really that Venn diagram kind of showed it. I'm trying to connect the dots of these massive technology changes that are happening and help you, give you some thoughts around what I think we should be doing to prepare ourselves, right? And how I'll be framing this today are based off the kind of way I think about security in modern organizations. So it's these three kind of principles, and a lot of them are, I think, becoming tropes and diatribes of what you hear all the time. Like the first one, security accelerates business. That's that security is a business enabler. I just want to side note, I saw a hilarious meme the other day talking about, it was the one with Beckham and Posh Spice, where he's kind of giving her a hard time about her posh upbringing. But he basically says that, security is not compliance is not security, blah, blah, blah. But, well, security is a business enabler. But what makes it a business enabler? Compliance. That's kind of funny. But I do think there are many other ways that security does enable business. That's just one of the funny jokes about it. But that's the way I operate my organization. Build for uncertainty is actually I heard a lot more around different circles being talked about, but this is my kind of mantra to my team. It's really about resilience, right? It's about making sure we build resilience into our operations and that we're prepared for whatever we don't think about, the unknown unknowns. And then the last one, and this is kind of my personal mantra, is hygiene over heroics, right? You have to make sure you're doing all the basics and all the hard stuff really well, not just saving the day and coming in when something goes wrong. Right? There is, believe me, there's a lot of room for that in our space, but that's the way I kind of try to operate my organization. And you'll see as we go through this presentation how these kind of mantras are, realized in some of the, at least, recommendations I'm giving. And so now I want to shift gears and we'll start talking about the first kind of part of that Venn diagram, which is AI. And this is one of the ways I've been trying to explain it to my organization or others that I talk to about what AI is becoming, at least within our organization. So one is the idea of this hyper smart intern, right? They can see everything, but they don't really have the context or the experience to make the right decisions, right? They will follow almost any order they give because they really want to get that job or that offer after their internship is over. They're very consistent given how simplified a lot of the internship roles we give interns is. They're very simplified, and so they're very consistent, and so they're easily manipulated to change in other ways. And then a lot of them are younger and smarter than most of us, and so they process things faster. But again, that lack of experience or context or real understanding makes them dangerous, right? And that's the way I kind of think about AI currently and likely into the next few years as we use it in our organizations in very different ways. And so the threat landscape of AI is changing. I mean, this is probably a lot of things you've heard before, but what I really want to focus on here are these three when we talk about AI. So one is this agentic AI shift. So in thinking about giving your internship more agency and more power over your business, right, is the kind of idea there. And we'll dig into more of these in more depth in the next few slides. But the attack surface expansion, so as we, just the LLM itself is like a big open prompt you can send all kinds of data into. But that plus MCP or A2A, these different kind of services standing up is just expanding the attack surface that we have to protect as security professionals. And then lastly is this bidirectional risk. Not only is the risk we have from using an AI in our own businesses, but also the attackers are starting to use them as well. And I'm sure you've seen 1,000 different examples of that in the wild, especially thinking about social engineering and whatnot. And so digging into the agentic threat a bit more, again, you can actually easily apply the intern analogy to this as well. So the first is memory poisoning, right, is influencing, essentially changing the data that was trained on to influence the AI to behave in a certain way, just like an intern. You give it that jaded, person who's about to retire, who doesn't really want to work there anymore and really hates your guts. You give them the intern and they teach them all their bad habits. Same kind of thing here. Tool misuse, so again, manipulating a tool to be used in an improper way. Context hijacking, this is a big one too. This is that malicious instructions being changed on the fly. And what I like to think about here on this side is context is a big, I think I heard about, talked about one of the presentations earlier. Context is kind of the theme of the day. I think going into next year with AI, it's going to be about context and how, and another concept that I kind of learned about maybe a year ago is this thing called concept drift, where an AI is trained on some data, but then that data becomes stale or becomes old, and so it starts getting questions outside of its training. How does it behave? How does it respond? And we'll talk a bit more about that kind of bias and a little more later. And then the last one is privilege creep. Has anyone ever had privilege creep in their organization? Of course, we all have. That happens constantly. But imagine with your AI, when your CEO is trying to push your company to drive faster and faster, and IT is cutting all the shortcuts to not really give the right controls or manage the controls or the accesses of an AI system, and then it can access everything all of a sudden, and you have a bigger, larger attack surface than you even thought. So that's the agentic side. I'm kind of seeing, look into the future. The actual attacking AI itself is a bit different, and this is really, I'm a big framework guy, so I tried to break it into these three buckets to kind of help understand. This is not comprehensive by any means, but at least it gives some kind of idea of what's going on here. So confidentiality, integrity, and availability, I love that framework since I started in security, but thinking about it from an AI perspective, confidentiality is not just the privacy or the information that your data, your company has. It's also your model. It's also maybe your proprietary training data. It's also how the decisions are being made at your company or the algorithms you use, right? There's a lot in terms of confidentiality you need to protect when you're protecting your own AI systems. Integrity, and I'm in the medical device space, so integrity is keying where I work, because if our messages we're sending to our medical devices aren't validated and don't have integrity, then we're in trouble. So that's a big one on our side. But from AI side, this is a big problem, right? With data poisoning, like I was mentioning, figuring out how to create backdoors to manipulate responses or manipulate inputs, and then even bias or discriminatory outcomes, right? Especially as we're starting to see a lot more of interfacing directly with your customers or interfacing directly with your partners. How are you managing that information? And then the last one is availability. I don't think we've really seen any attacks on this end yet, but I can imagine, given how expensive these things are to run, that there will be some availability attacks happening, some denial of services or over-processing, or if Claude wants to take over, they kind of figure out how to send information to ChatGPT to get it to respond slower or whatnot. There's all kinds of attacks happening in that side. And I'm just trying to frame how AI can be attacked in the world for you. This is not really here to solve all these problems. And then the last bit that I was talking about, that bidirectional, piece, is about this autonomous attacker, right? Attackers are starting to use AI. I mean, you probably all read many articles about this already, but I think I've kind of broken it into these four areas here. So one is this autonomous pen testing agents, which we've probably all seen some vendors trying to talk to us about, but think of those being used maliciously, right? Could be a very dangerous way to attack. The one that I think is more interesting is the second one here is cognitive ransomware. So I did hear about an actual attack where someone had put ransomware on someone's machine, and then they saw that ransomware making calls out to ChatGPT to actually help it do some of the infiltration work it was trying to do. So that's going to be a pretty interesting change for us. Social engineering 2.0, right? This is a really big risk we're looking at here, deep fakes or just any kind of way to manipulate somebody, find out all the data and information about them, which is one of my bigger concerns in my organization as well. And then lastly is this AI-discovered zero-day exploits. I was actually talking to someone last week who works with the ARPA-H program with the government, and they had run this AI cybersecurity competition, and they actually were able to find several 0 days with an AI tool they had developed themselves. So that is real, and I think that's all on GitHub. So even the attackers all have access to that now. So that's coming, yeah. And then another challenge here, what I kind of mentioned earlier, but this is, as the business enabler part of security is compliance, and so there's a couple areas that are moving pretty quickly on the AI side. The EU certainly, as just was with privacy, they're taking the kind of lead on this and developing their own overly archaic way of dealing with it, I'm sure, and it's going to be hard to deal with, but they are setting the pace, and a lot around risk assessments and ongoing maintenance and management, similar to the way we have to manage security in general, but it's something to be on the lookout for. And then the US also, in its own style, loves to do things in a patchwork fashion, so every state's going to have its own different laws on how to at least that's what's kind of unfolding right now, on how we have to comply with their rules around AI and management and data and all of this kind of thing. So I don't have all the answers again for these as well, but this is something to be watching out for as your companies start to develop AI or use more, whatever it is you're kind of preparing for. Make sure you're thinking about this as you go forward. And now, thinking about how to monitor these things, this is just some of the basic ideas and basic steps I thought it made sense that I'm doing at my organization that made sense for taking steps forward. The first is getting familiar with frameworks like the OWASP LLM Top 10. Right? They give you a lot. If you're running LLMs at your business or you are using them in some way, understanding the way these top 10 risks you have and how to protect them is something you should be putting into your testing frameworks. The second one, which is a kind of a little bit of an ancillary piece to security around AI, but I think it's actually really important, is tracking model and data lineage. Another way to say this is essentially data governance, but for your AI platform. So the models you're using, the data you're trained on, right? Making sure you're keeping track of that and managing and monitoring not only the life cycle of those, but the integrity of those over the whole period your AI system is running. I think about that's a lot of secondary. Everyone just wants to use the tool, not think about how to manage it. The other one that's very important too, I think is going to be a key, is the third one, developing evaluation metrics for safety, robustness, and bias, right? And not only will this help you making sure you're not telling your customers to screw off, right, on accident, but you're also kind of watching for anomalies, right? As if you see something, all of a sudden decisions are made or responses are a little bit different, maybe there's something that did happen to your data and whatnot. And then the last one is this. I think it's just important, but it's probably going to be good for help. If you all start doing it, you can help start training all the penetration testing companies to be good at this, but doing red teaming against your AI systems, right? I think there's a lot to be explored on that side and a lot of unknowns we still haven't faced yet, but that's important to make sure you're kind of executing that. And we'll talk a bit more detail again around what you can do, but this is just some basic things I thought there can put in place now to be able to look and make sure your AI is not going haywire. So now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about kind of the little bit of an unknown, a lot more uncertainty on this side, but shifting into quantum, right? And really, this is my belief. It may not be everyone's, but my belief is that I believe that this will fundamentally redefine not only security, but also computing itself, right? We'll have a whole different world in 15, 20 years in the way things are processed, the way things are managed, than we do right now, with just the raw power that quantum provides. And thinking about that in a bit more detail, these are the kind of current risks we're facing, right? That are not current, but they're pending risks that are going to be coming around the corner here pretty soon. The first one is the concept I want you to kind of take in, because this is what's happening today, is hold now, decrypt later, right? A lot of encrypted data is being stolen that attackers will, once they have availability of a quantum computer, can decrypt themselves. And we'll go into the next slide, we'll go into a bit more how that's a risk across different sectors and industries. The trust anchor collapse is a very interesting one, right? Because we rely on asymmetric encryption for a lot of things. Everyone's phones here, all the internet we use, a lot of different devices and long-lived systems, and even thinking about a PKI implementation, if you've ever done that before in your life, that is a heavy, heavy thing to do. And so what we're expecting, at least, is that quantum is going to challenge all of those mechanisms that we have in place. And so having to be able to being prepared for that collapse or the changes is kind of what I'll be talking about a bit later. And then the last one is what is really about addressing that. So I think if you've ever asked any of your development teams or IT teams to switch out their PKI or switch out their cryptography they're using, it is an absolute nightmare, right? And it's really challenging to make it happen, to orchestrate it, to get it all. So having crypto agility is something that's going to be very key, especially with all the unknown we have facing us. How are we going to make sure that our cryptography or the encryption we're using is swappable if need be, right? And that's the kind of idea. Not necessarily perfectly swappable, but at least you can be able to change it if you have to. So a lot, I'm sure you all just ate, you all look very hungry and full, I'm shoving a lot of information into you, but feel free to ask questions at the end or hold them to the end, but there's a lot coming here. And so thinking a bit more about the sector-specific side of it, right, this is where I was talking about the hold now, decrypt later, right? Patient records from healthcare can be 50+ year sensitivity. Something happened to you now, you don't want people to know about when you're 80, right? Financial transactions, right? History, algorithms, investment strategies, not something you want leaked. Critical infrastructure, also pretty important, right? Making sure that credentials and configurations are all managed properly, because I think we've heard a lot about the risks on that side. And then even the government, right? A lot of the information requires perpetual, confidentiality because of the nature of that. And so having that data be able to be lost just because you think people leave it out there because, oh, it's encrypted, it's protected, but it's not really anymore is the point. So apologize for this slide. It's a way speculative, but this is what I at least believe that some of the more credible people that I follow kind of follow this timeline here, at least as for now. We've already seen some of the post-quantum computing standards come out from NIST. They made an update this year, which we'll talk about in the next slide a bit more. So they're already thinking about it clearly. At least the best estimates for when quantum computing will arrive, not necessarily we're going to have them all in our laps, but at least they'll have one that functions normally, is between 2030 and 2035. So we're still 5 to 10 years away from this, but that's really when we believe that will arrive. And then the real number for a lot of security professionals is the next one, 2035 to 2045, which is when this concept of CRQC comes out, or cryptographically relevant quantum computing, when we actually believe they'll have a quantum computer that can break encryption. So again, these numbers are pretty far out there in terms of convincing a board to give you some investment in fixing your organization, but that's at least what a lot of the experts believe will be the timeline, right? Again, I'm not saying this is exactly what it's going to be, but that's the idea. So the standards did come out last year from NIST. I recommend you read them if you're involved in this sort of need to involve your organization in any way, and they will keep changing, right? Like this year alone, they added another algorithm to the list, and I've actually been seeing a lot of research coming out of a lot of the universities in the US. They're actually developing new crypto-safe algorithms and encryption methodologies as well. So there's a lot of change happening on this front, and like I said, the agility piece and being able to switch out in your organization is going to be key to protecting that. So another kind of item I want to discuss, because this is really what is going to be the challenge around quantum computing, is the actual migration itself. It's going to be a massive shift. So the performance tax, which it says on the first one, is really going to be the biggest challenge here. That key links and signatures of quantum computers are like 6 to 10 times larger than our current algorithms used right now. And so think about your IoT systems, your long-lived devices that are out there, your devices that use battery, right? All these things are going to be impacted. Bandwidth, storage, everything is going to be impacted. So there's a real performance tax that you need to prepare for, right? Your organization for. The other is this long tail of unpatchable systems, right? How many people are still holding legacy systems in their running that Windows 2008, right, in their organizations, right? I'm sure no one will dare raise their hand to that, but I'm sure one of you has it at least. And how are we going to make sure that all these systems are going to get patched and updated and upgraded in time, in time with the arrival of this capability as well as the needs of the business itself? Not to mention third parties, right? Vendors, there's a lot of difficulty, and I think there was the talk earlier about Forescout was talking about all the challenges we have with third parties, making sure that they're actually keeping up. And not only are they keeping up and protecting your organization, but also when you make the switch yourself, how are you going to integrate and communicate with those different organizations themselves? They need to also be prepared to move along with you. And so one of the thoughts, at least currently, is this idea behind hybrid mode. So I think they call it, one of them is hybrid TLS. It's where you can actually use a cryptographic or quantum-resistant algorithm in concert with the regular TLS and switch and go back and forth. I think about it just the way we use TLS currently. They do some negotiation around version number, and so that's the kind of idea of this hybrid mode for a little while until we get there. I think it's a pretty decent transition we're going to have to deal with. So given that, we have quite, I think we're going to see, and this is something we're probably already seeing, is there's going to be quite an adoption gap in terms of organizations preparing for quantum computing. Like I was mentioning earlier, legacy limitations. A lot of the devices we have are not going to be ready or prepared or capable of taking on a lot of this new algorithms, the new processing requirements. No one's really thinking about it too. Again, I mentioned earlier, it's a lot of people are like, okay, it's so far away, I don't even want to think about it. We have business problems we have to deal with now. We don't want to think about that long tail. And I'm not saying you have to go think about it tomorrow, but there is a need to start preparing your organization for it, which we'll talk about shortly. The skills gap, right? I think not many people are really aware of how quantum computing works or what the risks truly are. And one of the things I think about along that same lines is that there's clearly like a risk to our cryptography, right? We have to be able to figure out how to manage that. But on top of it, the capabilities or the applications that are going to be written in the quantum world or the type of attacks or anything, I don't think we're really prepared for that either because of just the massive amount of computing capability we're going to be getting with quantum. We don't really know what's going to happen, right? Or how that's going to happen or the speed with which it's going to happen or how we even, prepare for that. And then the last one is kind of along the same lines, right? There's this urgency versus readiness argument and debate that needs to happen here, along with the debate that this is not going to be a problem. So now I want to kind of come back to that first topic we talked about in the beginning, which is that kind of intersection between quantum and AI. And so the way I think about it here is, AI is this hurricane, right? It comes frequently, it comes often, it's evolving rapidly, it's changing, and quantum itself is an earthquake, right? It's more rare, but when it does come and hit, it can level whole cities, right, is the idea. And the way I'm trying to think about it, not instilling fear, but thinking about it in terms of that analogy. But I think together, both of these things can be solved for, at least prepared for, by what I'm calling here foundation engineering, right? I'd like to go back to that principle I talked about earlier, is building for uncertainty or building resilient systems, right? Thinking about it in that way and building that into your organization's DNA. And then the last piece of that too is, along those same lines, is avoiding bolt-ons, right? Is actually building in the process to start to prepare your organization for this. So almost like a ground up so you can prepare for this new change. Because I do believe that there's certainly the risks of each one of them themselves, but when they do converge, I think we're going to see a lot of problems that we can't even begin to fathom right now. And so now I want to give you a few practical steps, at least things that I'm thinking about on ways to start to prepare your organizations for this. So the first one, which I think our friends at Axonius talked about earlier, is inventory and assess. Start to understand what you have in your organizations, right? Think from the services you run, the crypto algorithms you have in place, all of the AI systems or the models or the data you're using or supporting, as well as start to think about the different surfaces and the third parties you're working with, right? This has always been a challenge in the security side, and that's why I the NIST cybersecurity framework has that identify as one of the most important factors, I think, and I think this is the key behind that, is just knowing what you're going to need to protect and need to sustain, and then even through the assessment, making sure you're prioritizing those properly for your business, right? So again, this is hygiene over heroics is what I think about this one. Design controls and SDLC updates, right? This is the next challenge we're going to be facing as well, is start to build in those, and this is what I'm talking about building from the ground up, is building in those crypto agility requirements, right? As you know, if you work with development teams, as they build new systems or IT comes in and puts in some new third party, make sure they have the ability to switch, the flexibility in the design to switch out the algorithms if necessary. Standardizing around key management, and even planning for this hybrid implementation, right? How can you handle both the old world and the new at one time to prepare for that? And then on the AI side, certainly a lot of the testing we mentioned earlier, right? The data governance you'll need, and AI governance and model governance you'll need around your AI systems. Get this all kind of understood and prepared. And a big one is the training, data quality, and bias audits, right? How are you really thinking about how your AI is behaving? So the last one here is a big one is, third-party risk management is a big challenge for all of us, but this is going to be becoming more challenging with these two new technological shifts, right? One is the SBOM you may have all heard of and may have all worked with, and the challenges around that, but now we're talking model bombs, training bombs, crypto bombs, all the kind of different bill of materials you're going to need to understand the inventory, but coming out of your third parties as well. Asking about the roadmaps, are they even thinking about this or planning for it, right? We said 70% of orgs are not, and that's probably a low number, frankly. Are your vendors even thinking about it? I know I did see Cloudflare here, and I know they mentioned they were already doing it on a lot of their endpoints. And another one I think that's not talked about too much on the vendor side is the actual incident response around this as well. I don't think we've seen that many AI incidents quite yet, but what is that going to look like in this new world, and how are we going to deal with that? And so again, the quick wins there are pretty much what I've mentioned already before, is start piloting these hybrid implementations, right? How do you start auditing your AI surface, and how are you really thinking about even your compliance gaps you may have in place and preparing for that? And then another one is at least start the conversation around post-quantum computing with your organization, or planning for that in some way, or at least maybe in your mind looking at what you have in place and where you may need to plan for that. And so this is what I want to give you to walk away with. Really, it's about giving you at least some basic steps. And when I first wrote this, I actually had like week one, month one, and I think that's kind of crazy given how long the timeline is here. But at least step one is start to educate and plan. Not only educate in your organization around the risks of this and the steps we'll have to take to prepare for it, but also get your teams up to speed and make sure they're aware of what they need to know and understand in these, both for AI and quantum. Step two is the inventory piece, right? Start documenting all the things you have in place and making sure you're aware of. Again, it's going to be unique to your organization. How much has your company embraced AI? How much are you at risk from a quantum perspective, right? Really thinking about that. And then I think it's important to start to implementations, not necessarily like rolling out, full-on development processes, but at least, updating your SDLC to prepare for this. Start piloting some of the hybrid modes, or even like looking at some of the critical systems. If you were to switch over to this new algorithm, the battery in your device is instantly dead, right? That's a problem you need to really start to plan for if that's the case. And then I think the key here is the last one, right, is this progress tracking, right? What are the milestones you're going to have to face, especially as that timeline I showed earlier becomes much clearer around quantum, or you start to see these massive changes happening in AI. How are you really making sure you're hitting the milestones that you set for your organizations to protect it adequately moving into that? Okay, and I think I went through these pretty quickly, but I do have it open for questions if anyone has any. Please don't be too mean. A lot of this is speculative. And I also put here for you questions to go ask yourselves or ask your organizations. But yeah, please go ahead.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's that Army cool. My name is Tahar, and as a CISO and my other fellow CISOs that's in the room, when we have the ear of the CFO, but if the cart does not get ahead of the horse, how do we as CISO have that conversation with infrastructure and energy, so that as we're building technology, that the energy and infrastructure.
I'm going to have you repeat that. So we have about 200 people watching online.
I'll say it again. Hello, my name is Tahar. Great conversation. So as CISOs are in the room who have the ear of CFOs in companies large, how do we have the conversation about energy and those allies that we have to make sure that the cart doesn't get ahead of the horse? So what that means, without the infrastructure scaling with ideas and what we're doing, is there symposiums that if they don't start already or they don't exist, that CISOs can start with a symposium inviting these infrastructure leaders, the energy leaders to the table so that we can move in tandem or in concert. Because when it comes to national security, it is in all of our best interests to get ahead so we have the same common goal to leverage what's happening. And I believe, from what I know, I used to be Army, well, it's going to happen a little bit sooner than the timeline. Only because it's motivated, but we can get there further faster. So I'm curious, what should the CISO's conversation should be?
So make sure I understand your question. So it's fine. Either I understand both words. Make sure I understand your question. So you want to, should there be a place where we can all have a conversation about the energy side? And I'm curious, when you say energy, do you mean protecting the critical infrastructure, or do you mean supplying enough to support these technologies that are going to be? Yep. Secure at the same time, so you can't be an afterthought. It has to be baked in. Okay. Scaling while secure. Sounds like a great idea for a symposium. If you want to start one, I'm not aware if there is one or not, but I think it's a good idea. And I have been on a few webinars where there are people talking about post-quantum and the kind of infrastructure piece to it. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much I can say in front here. Do I have plenty of time still? Yeah, I do. But that's the only place I've really seen it. I haven't seen it at a larger scale in terms of this sort of energy versus security need. I think there is that. But that's a great idea for an actual symposium and a discussion around it. Maybe someone, probably a lot of connected people in this room, can start that kind of conversation.
And the second thought of that is because we can't wait for government to get there. It's going to be the business who understands so that we all can be there and be the global solution to stay in the fight, if you will.
Yeah. Great question. Okay. Any more?
I just James Mandock, General Atomics, DoD side. You're medical. We're known for lagging behind. Have you had any success in road mapping, setting milestones? What does success look like for you as you've advocated for this? I could see AI more, but quantum, just in general.
Not really. So for AI, I certainly have. The organization is certainly interested in that, and we're trying to move forward as quickly as we can to leverage that. So I've been putting a lot of controls in place and making sure even the advice I'm giving here, I'm trying to follow that as well. So that has been easy. But it's, again, like I was saying in the beginning, it's right in our face and happening right onto us, and the hurricane keeps blowing through and changing the whole world up, right? But quantum, again, is still far out there, although apparently it's closer than I thought. So maybe we do need to start taking some steps. I don't know if it really is, but nobody can really tell. But I do think it is something we have to start preparing for. And I make a medical device, so we do lag behind. So thank you for pointing that out. I love that. But we do lag behind in terms of it's very expensive to make new devices and get them cleared by the FDA and get them on the market. But as we're starting to look at next generation, I am starting to have those conversations. Like, at least make sure that whatever you're putting in place doesn't have to support it, doesn't have to use it, but it can support that into the future as, like I said, the long tail of these devices does go beyond the timeline I had said there, right? And even thinking about, it's not just when your devices are going to be prepared and ready for that post-quantum world, but your data and the usage of that, of your products and services is going past that, right? Good question. That's a good one.
Yes, I was just curious on your view on a couple points. One, is the timeline is out there, right, 10 years before it's a reality. What are some of the things that are holding us up? And then also, how does it look from China's point of view, and I know we're all racing to bring this to the market. Just I'd love your thoughts on where China stands on this, what kind of big bet they're putting into this, and what that would mean just from an overall competition standpoint.
What was your first part of your question again?
Just the evolution and what's holding up it being a reality, because it's kind of been on this timeline for a while, and it always seems to be 10 years out.
The last I kind of understood about what's holding it up, it's two things. It's that you have to, the processor has to be so cold, right? It's like negative Kelvin, something crazy. I don't even know the number itself. That's one, and that requires, like, if you've seen the picture, there was one of the pictures I had in there of that was actually the quantum computer itself. It's very, very cold, and that just is, you can't have it in my pocket because of that. So that's one. The other aspect is, I believe, is error checking, like error correction, is that it's really prone to errors, and how that gets managed. That's all been handled in our current processor architectures, but how that gets handled in that is still being worked out. But there are, IBM, Microsoft, all kinds of universities hard at work on this, on trying to figure it out. And kind of segueing to the other part of your question, I'm pretty sure there's a ton of work going on in China as well to the same. And if you've seen those charts around the energy capabilities between the US and China, they're like 8xing us right now. And so they're hard at work at it. And likely given that energy capability and the number of scientists they have in their country, may get there first, right? I'm speculating completely, but may happen given that what they have in place, right? So yeah, they're certainly going to think about it and going to try to use it in some way. And it's actually an interesting point you bring up too, because when I think more about quantum, and it is kind of still out there and kind of hazy, I don't think about just the cryptography aspect of it. I think about what else can this be used for, right? And then you converge it with a really great AI, which by the time this comes out in 10 years, the AIs will be smarter than all of us together, right? And so those two together, and the processing capability and the intelligence, it's going to be a whole new world. And not just for us in security, but for technology and computing as a whole. It's going to be a completely different world. So just like the internet shifted everything on its head, this is the next kind of big shift I think we're all facing. And one of the things one of the reasons I put this talk together is because I think this actually is an opportunity for all of us to be the architects of trust, right? How do we really build in trust in this new world and make things more secure and make sure we can still function? Because as you saw in my philosophies, security is a business enabler. And if we don't, kind of to your point, if we don't have the security around these capabilities and we can't trust it, then we're not going to have good business. Any more questions? Oh, over here.
Hello? Okay, hi. Liliana with Sempra and SDG&E, but I'm thinking smaller. I'm thinking smaller businesses. So I was going to ask you, outside of cybersecurity, how can small businesses prepare for something like this with limited access and finance? Are they looking into merging with bigger companies? What are your suggestions?
I don't know if merging to a bigger company is the best idea.
No, I mean like collaborating or like paying off services, like maybe.
I mean, I think it's just like any other small business. They use almost like a SaaS play, right? Use a third party to kind of manage it and do it for you. That'd actually probably be a pretty decent business as you're in a AI farmer almost, right? You create and you manage and you cultivate an AI that's safe for use by other businesses, right? I think that's a pretty decent idea. But that's what I would imagine that's how the market is going to shift, to where a lot of the things I'm mentioning here, you'll just outsource, right, to some degree.
Yeah. You being in the medical field, you know that there's a lot of little medical boutiques out there. I have a lot of friends who own little practices here and there. Mm-hmm. So always curious to know what's the best way to secure their little practice and their little businesses like that.
I advise a lot of those, and it is difficult because they don't have a lot of money, and this security stuff is expensive. So really when I advise them, what I work on is process. And like one of my principles, again, is hygiene over heroics. So just doing these basic things very well. Like, don't let your IT become sloppy and just forget all their assets. They don't, and don't let your company just do whatever it wants and add all the things. Like, build some basic governance and some basic hygiene around yourself to do the best you can. The problem with small boutique medical devices is that then if they have a medical device that is of any kind of medical consequence, getting past the FDA requires this massive lift of security nowadays. And so that's kind of a huge hurdle that they're kind of getting over, that I'm trying to help advise smaller companies on. But at the end of the day, it does become down to $1. You need to be able to have some money to be able to do that. That's always been the case with FDA clearance, but with this now kind of additional burden on security, it is burdensome, and it's very detailed and very prescriptive. It's just a challenge they have to face, right? Yeah. Great question, though. Thank you. More?
Stole my thunder just a little bit with that, because that's where I was going with it. But I do want to piggyback off of that, because my concern has been being prepared, right? Everything that you talked about, I'm looking 5, 7, 10 years down the road, and all our current tools, all our current defenses could be obsolete. So what are we doing? And it really was more about the mid-sized small businesses that I was more concerned about, because look, the Microsofts, the Amazons of the world, they're going to be able to scale. They're going to be able to do what they need to do. But even from your position, and obviously other leaders that are here in the room right now, are you having those conversations now with leadership? And on the flip side, your engineers that you're bringing in, are you starting to think about training and what are the tools and the knowledge that we're going to need in the next 5 to 7 years to be prepared for this?
Yeah, I put that on there as one of the things, right? As the gap you have in your skills, right? There's not only the skills gap you have in your organization, so your team, none of my team understands quantum computing and the risks around that out of what I've said to them. And even the risks around AI they're coming, and we kind of getting more clarity around them, but they're still shifting and changing, especially as the capability changes a lot. So I think it's just going to have to keep on top of it with real professional training is number one. And then the other side of it, which thankfully AI helps with this, is a ton of research. So that's what I do to make a presentation like this, is I just go and learn on my own. And frankly, when I hire someone, the only real questions I'm asking them is that, how are you educating yourself? What do you do outside of your job to make sure you're up to date and you're learning and you're doing things? Like, is it creating TikToks around security? Is it whatever they're doing to learn and develop themselves is like base criteria for joining my organization. So that's going to be the new reality too, is that you have to keep learning, especially as this stuff changes and shifts and morphs into whatever it's going to be in the future. How do you can't prepare for the uncertainty is very difficult unless you are constantly learning and growing. That's the only thing I would suggest on that side. But great question, yeah.
Jacob, we have a lot of audience interaction online. We have one from Rochelle Fine on screen here for you for the crowd, if you want to go ahead and read that and respond.
Yeah, I have no idea, right? That's more your space or someone Semprus, right? You're more about the energy side than us. But this is, like I said earlier, I was talking about the difference between China's energy and ours. This is a huge concern. This is probably our biggest national security threat right now, is the lack of energy we have. Right? And I know there's a lot of companies doing, I always say this word wrong now because of the president we had in the early 2000s, but nuclear energy, right, is coming. That is going to be one that's going to save us, but the time horizon for that is massive. Solar is just, there's not enough. I mean, we have plenty of desert, I guess we can use it, but that's a big problem we're facing as a country, right, is figuring out how to get enough energy. And I think there's a lot of people much smarter than me talking about that. So I hope that, Rochelle, that answers your question, wherever you are.
Hi, this is Michael with California Coast Credit Union.
Okay, there you are. Hey, Michael.
So like you were saying, I kind of skeptical about like how much we can realistically prepare for AI equipped with quantum. So I'm wondering, like, because the day is coming when we're going to have a AGI equipped with a powerful quantum computer, and the way I see it, the only thing that can kind of defend against that is another AGI equipped with a powerful quantum computer. So, like, we can't really understand, like, comprehend, like, what is going to change that. I mean, do you really think we can realistically prepare for that?
No, that's the whole point, right? Awesome. Like, we really don't know, right? And one of my principles is like building for uncertainty. We have no clue what it's going to look like, but I do think there's some basics we can do to at least understand what we're dealing with in our little world we have, right? So doing the inventory, building the agility in place, right? So in the world where that does manifest, we can pivot and change and recover from any of the issues that happen. That's all I'm really saying, because I really have no idea. And even your question, again, makes my brain spin around what is it going to look like, right? We have no idea. And the kind of risk side of my head is like, I hope we have a big settlement on Mars at that point, because I feel like this place will be kind of taken over, right? Sorry, that's a little down, but that's the idea. How are we doing on time? We good?
Time, we're doing great. We got 10 minutes. Got another virtual. Go ahead and bring it on screen. 2 box.
Okay.
Thank you. From Joyce Saribe.
Yeah, that's exactly what the talk was about, right? Is making sure we're future-proofing our programs. Again, it's the slides are not up anymore, but it's the basic things around inventory, right? Making sure you have understanding of your landscape. The second one is around your processes, so your design controls, your SDLC, how you deploy and build out IT systems, making sure those are all prepared and you've really put that agility and a flexibility into your systems. And then the last one is your third parties and your in training, right? Making sure your company is up to speed and all your vendors are up to speed as well. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. I'm Eric with Cotality, and just around AI, I'm kind of curious. AI is like expert systems, and you need human experts to be able to recognize if AI is giving you good answers. But at the same time, it seems like implementing AI is eliminating a lot of entry-level positions that eventually would grow to be your next generation of the experts.
Right.
Is there any kind of, are they just thinking by the time we get to that point, you can just trust AI, or where are those experts going to come from if you eliminate all your path to that?
We're working on it, right? I don't know, right? That's, again, a lot of the uncertainty here. That's something I think about as well. I mean, I have kids, so I think about their future. Like, they can't even there's no more paralegals, right? There's no more entry-level lawyers, which may be a good thing for all of us at the end of the day. But what does it really look like for how we're moving forward? I have no idea, right? And I think just like we had this weird COVID gap of these poor kids who were going into high school when they were in COVID, or their freshman year of college was over COVID, we're going to have this kind of AI gap, I think, as well, that it's like the lost generation of people who, while AI took over all the entry-level jobs, they had nothing to do. But the way I'm kind of starting to see it unfold, or at least people are talking about it, is that we'll go from this sort of worker bee culture to more of an entrepreneurial culture, to where people have, because these people growing up and who grew up in AI can now just orchestrate an entire business on their own, right? Instead of having to go and listen to the jaded, 20-year-old COBOL programmer, right? They can go and kind of build it themselves, right? That's at least the one optimistic way of looking at it, I think, is that our culture will shift a bit. I'm worried about the economy, frankly, too, like what's going to do to that.
Quick comment, Tahar and I just decided that, what was it? Trusting AI? Yes, oh, it's an oxymoron, yeah, so trusting AI is definitely an oxymoron.
You're probably already
Just
trusting
saying.
it today. If you drive a Tesla, you're probably trusting it to some degree, right? Okay, all right. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your questions. Have a great day.